Hey everybody, this is Tony back again for the How to Play for the Science and Seance Society. We're going to go ahead and start with the Seance side, since it is the side that will always start every game of Science and Seance Society. If you want to see how all this was set up, we have earlier videos that you can check out. We're just going to be covering gameplay and how a turn works for the Seance player and then the Science player inside of this video. So, to recap, the Seance player's goal in this game in particular is to try to get all of the cards here, these 5 cards, arranged in numerical order. These special ability cards are all on their black side, meaning that we want the numerical side to be facing us. And we want them in numerical order, so we want them to be 1 through 5. That's our end goal. That's how we win. There is also a way that we can lose if we run out of cards in the deck. That can actually cause us to lose the game, and the Science player can win that way. So, it's kind of a balancing act between using what you can to meet your victory condition while also avoiding the condition that will lose you the game. So let's go over how a turn works. So, both players have a reference card that is a tarot-sized card that specifically calls out exactly how their turn plays. This is reminder text. The rulebook goes into a little bit more detail about what each one of these actions mean, but this will help you follow along as I go ahead and go through what you can do on your turn. So, as the Seance player, you have 2 phases. Phase 1 and Phase 2. In Phase 1, you get to choose one of the following options. So these cards here are my hand. I have this hand of 3 cards. And then I can now look at these and see what I want to do of these. I can do one of them. So the first option I have is draw a card from the deck. This is very simple. I just take a card from the deck and stick it into my hand. The orientation in my hand doesn't matter. How I play it to the table will affect how the orientation goes once it's in play. But in my hand, it doesn't matter what the orientation is. I may want to orient them all so that the black side is facing me, since the black side is what will allow me to win this time. But it's by no means necessary to do that. So, that's one thing that I can do. Another thing that I can do is I can replace one of the cards on the table, one of the cards in the tableau, with one of the cards in my hand. Now, I can't just do this however I wish. In order to replace a card in the tableau from one from my hand, I have to match the ability on one of the sides. So, black and white don't matter. It just has to match the ability. And I specifically have to keep it in the orientation that matches the ability. So to make that make a little sense, these 2 gray cards here, obviously, have no black and white sides. They cannot be in my final lineup in order for me to win the game, so I'm going to have to replace them over time. They're just special abilities that kind of get me started. So in this case, I have the option here of replacing one of the cards, really easily, with something that's actually favorable to me. I can get my 4 right here in this position, because this ability right here matches this ability right here. So I could replace this card with a card in the same orientation. And that would let me get my 4 here, which means now I have my 3 and my 4 in, which is pretty good start, honestly. The card that I replace, if it's one of the white-backed cards, is just basically out of the game. If it's one of the other cards, it goes to my discard pile. So, let's say that I hadn't done that, and I instead looked to replace a different card inside of the tableau. Let's see, let's find one where I can do an opposites. Here's one. So this isn't a good move, but it's a move that I could take. I could take this card right here with this black symbol and replace it right here with this card. As you can see, I replaced a black-sided card with a white-sided card, but the ability is what matched, and the orientation stayed the same. So where the ability is what matters in this case. Again, that's not a good move, so I'm not going to do that one here as an example. I just wanted to show you what I mean when I say replacing a card in the tableau matches the ability. So that's the second thing you could do in phase 1. The final thing that you can do in phase 1 is you can discard one of the cards that's in your hand to activate one of the abilities on the card. So the abilities are a little bit more clear here on the other side of the reference card. So they include drawing one card, is that plus symbol ability there. Rotate a card, letting you spin it from one side to the other. Swap two adjacent cards is literally just trading two adjacent cards. Swap a card with 1/2 away. Pretty self-explanatory. And then take any card from discard back into your hand. So those are the different abilities that you could have. So let's say that I wanted to draw a card. I could discard this card. Like say I don't like this one for whatever reason. Like say I've already have ones out in the field. I could discard this and draw a card. I could also discard this one to take a card from my discard. So if I were to discard that and this was in my discard, I could pick it up and put it into my hand. So those are the 3 different things that you can do in phase 1. You're going to do one of those things. Either drawing a card from the deck, replacing one of the cards in the tableau, making sure to match the ability and the orientation of the ability when you do so, or discard a card from your hand to activate an ability on that card. Then we get to phase 2. In phase 2, you first have the optional ability to discard any card to remove a die from any card or a non-locked gear. So, what does that mean? Well, there are a couple of places that dice can be. One of the places is on your opponent's goal cards. So, for those who may not remember, the goal cards, the gear cards look like this. They'll kind of be facing you like this. And this right here are the dice that are required to complete that goal. So let's say that this die was sitting on it across the table. You could discard one of your cards to just remove this die. When you remove the die, it'll go to the void, and it will hang out there until there are 3 dice in the void, at which point it will go back in the science player's bag. This can be useful in a couple of ways. 1, it slows your opponent down. 2, dice that are not in their bag are dice that they cannot draw. And if at any point the science player cannot draw dice from their bag, they lose the game. So you can kind of let some dice, up to 2, build up there to try to speed up that loss condition for the other player. As I said, you're also slowing them down by removing dice that they are requiring in order to actually succeed in their particular mission. So, that's one place that you could discard a card to remove a die from. The other place is one of your cards. So let's say the science player on their turn had placed this die here. This die makes it so that I cannot use the ability on this card. So I can't use this swap to adjacent cards ability at all until that die is gone. If I'm relying on that ability, I can discard a card to again send that die to the void. If I'm not relying on that ability, I may be able to just leave it there for a while. I can still move this card, like for example, if I wanted to activate this ability to swap a card with a card that is 2 away from it. I could swap this card and this card just fine, even though the die is on it. However, I can't use that ability. There is a danger, however, to leaving dice on cards, and we'll go into it a little bit more on the science player's turn, but if ever a second die is placed on the same side of one of these cards, that card will be discarded from my tableau, and the science player will then get to draw 3, choose the new card and the new orientation of it to replace the card that they've just discarded. Again, dice will then leave this and go to the void, where they will hang out until at least 3 build up, at which point the science player will get them back. So, since 2 dice on a card gets rid of it, and allows the science player to potentially, allows the science player to replace it with a potentially disadvantageous card of their choosing, and an orientation of their choosing, sometimes getting rid of dice is the best option. Again, this is completely optional. You never have to discard a card to remove dice. Maybe it's early game and there are no dice on the board, or maybe you have all of the cards that you need specifically to win, and you don't want to spend any to remove dice. That's completely up to you. Once you've decided whether or not you want to discard a card to remove a die from any card or a non-locked gear card, I should mention non-locked means that not all 3 dice are on it. All gear cards require 3 dice to be completed, but once they're completed, those dice are locked. You can't affect them as the Seance player, and the Science player never gets them back for the course of the game. So once a gear is locked and completed, they can't leave. So you can't discard dice from that gear. The final thing that you'll do on your turn is activate up to 2 tableau abilities. So activating 2 tableau abilities, again, references the abilities that are on this side, the same as if you were discarding them from hand. However, you get to do these every turn. You get to choose 2 of them. So if I wanted to, I could specifically choose to, let's see, what's a good example here? What would be a useful thing to do? The difficulty I have here, and just to highlight it, is that I can only use the abilities that are in my tableau right now. So, one thing that would be useful is to get this 5 spun around. So I can use this ability right here to rotate this. Now, when you've used an ability, you want to lower the card in your lineup so that it's clear that you've used one. I can then use one more, and let's say I just want to draw a card. So I'll just draw a card and add it to my hand. I've used 2 abilities. These will now go back up into the lineup, and that's officially the end of my turn. Now, say there weren't any abilities that I specifically wanted to use. In that case, if I cannot use the abilities, like say everything is locked with dice, or I do not want to, I can choose one of these single-use abilities to use. Once I use it, it's out of the game. So I could use this rotate to make this same rotation, but it now goes into the box, and I no longer have it for the rest of the game. As the Seance player, you can use all of these abilities over the course of the game, but obviously you only get to use one per turn because it replaces you activating the abilities in your tableau. So once you've gone through both of your phases, in phase 1, choosing what you want to do. In phase 2, choosing to either discard a card to remove a die or not, and then activating your 2 tableau abilities. Your turn is over, and you will now pass it to the Science player, who we will cover in just a second. Now that we've seen how the Seance player plays, we're going to cover how the Science player's turn goes. So, on the reference card, as you can see, the turn is divided into 3 steps. So step 1 is optional. So the way that step 1 works is you may choose to place one of your dice on a Seance card. So Seance cards, as you can see, look like this. They have specific dice, values, and or colors that are allowed to be placed on these cards. The advantage of doing this is that if a die is on this card, then the Seance player cannot use its ability. So for example, we could take this 6 that we have behind our screen and place it on this card, which means that we don't have that 6 available for our use for the rest of our turn. However, it does kind of lock this card's ability down so that the Seance player cannot use it on their turn. Again, if we, on a subsequent turn, because here we only get to place 1 die, like say next turn we have a black 6 and we place it on this card, we would actually get to discard this card completely from the Seance player's tableau. And then we would draw 3 cards from the top of their deck, choose one to replace their card with, and then the other 2 would go on to the bottom of their deck. So this gives us a way to really slow down or at least throw a monkey wrench in the plans of the Seance player. Again, this is completely optional, but it is step 1 of your turn. Then we get to step 2 of the turn. Step 2 is where the meat of the Science player's turn actually happens. In this step, we actually get to place dice on any number of our gear cards. So, looking at what we have back here, we actually have places for all of these dice if we want to use them that way. So we could place this 6 here. We could place 2 of these 1s here. Again, the equal signs here note that while these have to be white dice, they also have to match value. And then we could potentially place this 2 here. This could be our entire turn and what we do with our dice. This itself isn't a bad turn. We could, of course, have placed this 6 on the Seance player's side to slow them down and still had this as the rest of our turn. And again, totally a valid turn. In step 2, we also have the option of using our one-time ability cards. Again, we are only going to be able to use 2 of these over the course of the game, and you can only use 1 of them on a turn. So if I were to say, decide that I wanted to use this one to convert any die to any number, as you can see here, I could have used this to turn this into a 1, and then placed it here to complete that gear. Now, this ability would be discarded from the game, and then I would have to choose one of these 2 abilities to also discard from the game. So in this particular case, I think I am going to go ahead and discard the any color one, leaving me with the reroll card for the rest of the game. Again, you can only use 1 of these per game, but when you use your first special ability card, you have to get rid of a second one of your choosing, leaving you with just the one that's left. Now, this means that I've completed a gear, so I can mark this as complete. These 3 dice are locked down here for the rest of the game. The Seance player can't mess with them, they can't be taken away from me. They are done for all intents and purposes. This means that I now have access to this ability, which, again, lets me change a die to any number before placing it, that I can use on subsequent turns. Again, I can only use 1 of these abilities per turn, however, I can use 1 of these abilities in conjunction with a one-time use ability. At the end of the turn, you then move on to your step 3, where you draw 4 more dice. Draw 4 more dice, and then you roll those behind your screen. And that would be the end of your turn. So, step 1, place a die on a Seance card if you wish. If it's the second die on that Seance card, you can trash and replace it. In step 2, you place any number of dice on gears. You may use your single-use ability cards during this time. You may also use abilities on completed gears during this time. And you place all of your dice in this step. One thing I want to show you is that, and I'm going to fudge the dice a little bit here to make this work. We'll use this one. So we're going to go ahead and put this 1 and this 3 here to complete this one. And let's say we've moved to this part of the game. And we now have these, which technically could both be placed here if we wish. And that in and of itself is not a bad turn. Now, if we wanted to use one of these abilities on our turn, like say we are on another subsequent turn and we don't have the 6 that we need for this particular gear, I can use this ability, and when I use it, I move this here to cover up the ability, to change one of these dice into a 6. So I make this a 6, which means that I can place it here. Now, I can't use any more of these abilities on this turn, but I could use this ability if I wanted to. On a subsequent turn, say we're at that place, I could use this ability. This ability won't come back until all of the abilities that I currently have completed are used. So once I use this one, then both of these will come back and be available for use again. So sometimes it's very good to complete a really powerful one so that you can keep cycling through it a few times throughout the course of the game. Other times you're just going to be racing to complete them as quickly as possible. So that's what you're going to be moving towards. Again, if we were now on the Seance player's turn, and I had restarted this turn to here, where I was, the Seance player could potentially get rid of dice off of this by discarding a card on their turn. So say they go, nope, you're too close, I don't like that. They could get rid of a die and set it in the void, which means that I'm not quite there. They cannot, again, touch any of these dice because these gears are completed and so they're locked down. So it's often best to try to focus fire a specific goal rather than having a few dice out on every goal. The other reason for this is that if you ever reach into the bag to try to draw dice, and you cannot to roll your 4 at the end of the game, you lose the game and the Seance player wins. So your specific conditions are to try to complete all 5 of these goals before the Seance player completes their goals, or before you run out of dice, which covers the gameplay for the Science player. Once you've rolled your dice behind your screen, it will then shift over back to the Seance player, who will again take their turn as detailed earlier in this exact same video. Play will continue until either one of the players meets their victory condition, or one of the players hits their loss condition, either the Seance player running out of cards in their deck, or the Science player running out of dice in their bag. Regardless of who wins, I hope that you all have a great time with the Science and Seance Society, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you.